Baptists don't always move in the straightest line from A to B, but we eventually get from A to B. Hey guys, Joe here, back to the Word today with a really cool video. Women pastors, IVF resolution, and more. My SBC 2024 reflections and kind of recap what happened. Yes, this year, because of it being located in Indianapolis, Indiana, I personally was able to go to the Southern Baptist Convention for the first time as a staff member and a messenger from my church. I'm going to be doing 3 videos on the SBC on my channel. So this is the one that's going to cover the issues talked about at this year's National Convention of the Southern Baptists. I'm going to do a video that dives deeper into the law amendment and the issue on women's pastors and what that means for complementarianism for our denomination as a whole. So pay attention for that video coming out soon. And I also want to do a fun just recap video where I share some moments and kind of some footage of me going to the actual convention, as well as some of the swag and the giveaways that I got, and highlight those as well. So pay attention for those videos. But as even last year, I started doing an SBC reflections video as I stay tuned in as a Southern Baptist Church member, but also someone on staff as the media and college kind of minister and digital media specialist for my church. I stay tuned into Southern Baptist life. I'm also a seminary graduate of Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary, so I stay tuned in. And I've done these videos. It's not my normal type of videos, but I like to cover these things just to get my thoughts out there. It's even if it's just beneficial for me to put it all in one place. It's also a teaching aid to share with others as they ask about the SBC, what happened, what it means, those sorts of things. So I hope you'll enjoy this video. I'm also going to put any resources that I put up on the side in my notes. I'm going to put up on a blog post, so you can go straight to that blog post. It'll be linked in the description of this video, and you can go and click on any of the resources that I'm mentioning here and get even some of the bare bones notes / highlights that I'm going to be sharing with you guys during this video. So in this video, all of the content is going to be timestamped, so you can hop ahead to the section that most interests you. But I'm going to go through how the SBC, or the Southern Baptist Convention, is organized. So just a reminder about polity and cooperation. Also, the major issues this year, clarity on some of those, and continued conversation, what we can kind of expect for those will be a section of this video. And then I'll give my upcoming convention items for 2025, things that are going to come up once again, as well as final thoughts. So with that, this is Back to the Word. My channel exists to equip and encourage you to read the Bible, good books, and have conversations that truly matter. This falls into the third category. I think it's something that's theological as well as practical for those as Baptists and Southern Baptists as well. So, first up, how the SBC is organized. I find it intriguing to learn about how the SBC is organized, and I think even people in my church, as a Southern Baptist church, as members, don't fully realize how the SBC is structured. So I find myself teaching this content to people again and again and again on a regular basis. So just a reminder up front for those who need that. If not, just skip right ahead to the sections that you want to watch. But first, you should know that when it comes to the authority of the Southern Baptist denomination, it's an upside down pyramid. What's at the top and what's most authoritative, kind of sets the rule for their churches, are the members. We are congregational in our polity. That comes from historic Baptist distinctives. So we believe all members are under the lordship of Jesus Christ, and they together as a congregation, so congregationalism, set the direction of the church under the lordship of Jesus Christ. So historic Baptist distinctives of congregationalism or elder-led congregationalism kind of come up. It's tied to, this polity structure is tied to the autonomy of the local church to set what they believe based on the Bible, based on Scripture, and also the priesthood of every believer. We are not like turn the pyramid right side up, like Episcopal with a bishop or someone at the top, kind of like the Pope, nor are we Presbyterian in that the top of that pyramid is a group of pastors. That comes from the Greek word pastor, presbyteros, so Presbyterian. No, we're more congregational. So there's kind of two forms of polity there. You have congregational, where the congregation votes on everything. And then a lot of us have more of an elder-led congregationalism, where the congregation votes on major things for the church, like the budget, building issues, ministry things, whether they're going to replant a church or they're going to plant a church or those sorts of things. And then they vote on their elders, and the elders lead most of the daily ministry things throughout the year. So enough on there, but I'm saying that's at the top. So, and then below that, so lower authority, we choose together as Baptist congregations, as local autonomous churches, to cooperate together in local associations. So my church is in the Greater Dayton Association of Baptists. We have an associational missionary who serves the churches of our association in this area through pulpit supply. The GDAB office, as we call it, has resources that churches can utilize that maybe they are not able to afford personally on their own, like a mobile baptismal or a trailer for certain outreach events or tables and chairs. And the association provides that to churches as a resource, pooling our resources together to do more together as like-minded churches in faith and practice. And then, so that's local autonomous churches. And then, the next level up, even though the authority is most strongest at the local level, we choose to cooperate as local associations. Then we choose to cooperate as state conventions. So those associations come together at state conventions. So we have the State Convention of Baptists in Ohio. And then above that is the Southern Baptist Convention, or the National Convention. And so Baptists cooperate together nationally. And then at the national level, there are Southern Baptist entities and some other types of things we can talk about that are funded all the way up by local churches. And so we do that through the funding, most of it through the funding engine known as the cooperative program. I can spend way more time on that, different video, but that's the overview. A local church decides to cooperate with their local association, then they become part of the state level, and then they become part of the national convention or the national level. One thing I did find out as I was just reading through this, actually personally, the book of reports from Indianapolis, just wanted to check on it. Every church that applies, there's criteria in here. I'll talk about more of this in my law amendment / video on women pastors and what didn't pass this year at the convention. There are criteria in here that a church has to meet to seat messengers that represent, members of Baptist churches that they send to vote and be a part of National Southern Baptist business. And so if a church meets all that criteria and has applied, then they can automatically seat 2 messengers based on giving. Then some other criteria, they can seat more messengers, and the maximum is 12 per church. So that's covered in Book of Reports in the Constitution. It talks about more of how those things are done, but they send messengers every year to cooperate or to participate in convention business, representing a member of that local church at the national level. So, all right, moving into the next segment of the video, the major issues this year that came up at the convention. It wasn't like we were dealing with huge issues. Some years, everyone's sending as many messengers as they can to vote on convention business, because really you want to be a part of it, because it talks about how we are cooperating together as Baptists. There's things that happen that are moving, the direction of the denomination, and things about planting churches together, and things about sending missionaries together, and things about how our money as Southern Baptists is being used. And so you want to stay tuned into that. You want to be a part of that. But there are years where bigger issues and conversations are at stake and people send more messengers. And then there's other years where there's less things that are big news and it's sending a ton of messengers. This is one of those years there's fewer things, but the biggest one was women pastors, and the law amendment is something everyone knew coming into this convention was going to be talked about and voted on. So just a little bit about it. I'm going to do a much longer video. I'll link to it in the description once it's up on this and the details about it, but here's the overview of what happened in Indianapolis. So it passed, the law amendment passed in 2023. I'll get more into the history in the longer video, but it passed in New Orleans, but it needed to pass a second time to go into the Constitution. So the way our Constitution is written, an amendment to the Constitution has to be voted by a 2/3 majority in one convention, and then it has to be voted on a year later in the next convention consecutively. So what it was called for, what the amendment, known as the Law Amendment because it came from Mike Law, was calling for was the addition or adding clarity on the stance of women pastors to the Constitution of the Southern Baptist Convention, specifically as criteria needed to be met by churches in friendly cooperation. So you can see page 39 in the Book of Reports talks about this specifically and lays out the motion and / amendment. The amendment of the Southern Baptist Constitution, Article 3, it would have added a 6th article to state that churches in friendly cooperation must affirm, appoint, or employ only men as any kind of pastor or elder as qualified by Scripture. So the documents that govern the Southern Baptist Convention would be our charter, why we exist, also the Constitution and the bylaws. So Constitution, who we are, and a bunch of other different rules, the bylaws, how we conduct our business. And then also there's a business and financial plan that you can find in the Book of Reports, as well as the Baptist Faith and Message 2000, which is our confessional document as a convention and as Southern Baptists. So what this would have done is put in the Constitution a hard stance, or a pretty clear, very clear stance on only men as pastors at any level. So any kind of pastor as qualified by Scripture. We already have in the Baptist Faith and Message 2000, our confession, the statement that says, while both men and women are gifted for service in the church, the office of pastor is limited to men as qualified by Scripture. So we already have in our confession a statement that says the office of pastor is limited to men as qualified by Scripture. So the confession already says that. This would have added that type of thing and made it a bit stronger. Any kind of pastor. There are people who have wanted to poke holes in the confession a little bit in different ways. I'll get into that in the longer video. But it would have added more clarity, taken it a little step further. Any level of pastor, been more clear, and put it in the Constitution. And so it would have been in both places. It would have been in the confession and in the Constitution. And so it needed to pass by a supermajority of 66%. It ended up failing. And so it was a ballot vote. It came up failing, and it only got 61.45%, or 5,099 votes. But it needed a supermajority of 66 to pass. So the best article I have seen on what does this failure of the law amendment mean for women pastors and Southern Baptists, it really comes from Denny Burke. I've just put the link there. I'll put it in the blog so you guys can find it. But what does the failure of the law amendment mean? I think he has a great diagnosis. We are complementarian. That is not, it's not really opening the door to women pastors. It is really people saying, and Southern Baptists saying, we have a mechanism that is working to find churches not in friendly cooperation, and we do not feel that this statement needs to be in two places. It's already in our confession, is kind of the consensus of the Denny Burke article. But we also need to remain vigilant, and we vote complementarian. We voted out a church this convention year, 91%, because we're complementarian and we're not egalitarian, and they took a clearly egalitarian stance. So we found them not in friendly cooperation, but people really were looking at this amendment and saying, we don't need it in two places. We have a mechanism that's working, and we are going to leave that in place. If you want more on these types of issues, as well as the complementarian, there's both just things for the convention. There's two really great videos. 9 Marks at 9 does these great events during the convention. I've been a part of them as well at the Gospel Coalition type of things. And so this year they did Convention Authority versus Church Authority. So I'll link that on my blog as well. And then the State of the SBC, Cooperation and Complementarianism. Both really good conversations this year about these issues. Another major issue that came up and made headlines was the IVF Resolution Passed. So first up, what is a resolution? A resolution is something that Southern Baptists submit at a certain time during the year that's brought by the Resolutions Committee, and they are non-binding. So they don't mean really anything beyond that on this day, messengers from their churches said this about this current cultural or theological issue. And so people submit statements or resolutions that go to the Resolutions Committee, and when time expires to consider those resolutions, they are just gone. And so at a certain point during the Indianapolis Convention, there was a resolution voted on. It was known as Resolution 6. On the full title of the resolution was on the ethical realities of reproductive technologies and the dignity of the human embryo. So I have a link there, and I'll put on the blog for the resolutions if you want to go read the whole resolution yourself. It's all found on page 14, the specific one of the document I have linked there. The major statement in it, while it's a whole list of whereas, resolved, the big one is the resolve. The messengers of the Southern Baptist Convention meeting in Indianapolis, Indiana, June 11th through 12th, 2024, call on Southern Baptists to reaffirm the unconditional value and right to life of every human being, including those in the embryonic stage, and to only utilize reproductive technologies consistent with that affirmation, especially in the number of embryos generated in the IVF process. And then it goes on and you can read more about it. Dr. Moeller did a good teaching segment on this as a part of his briefing on Monday, June 17th. He really talked about what Southern Baptists were saying by passing this resolution. So you can find that link on my blog as well. But here's a quote from that specifically briefing that I thought was important. He says, Southern Baptist Convention in passing this resolution was expressing urgent moral concerns about the practice of IVF or in vitro fertilization, advanced or assisted reproductive technologies by passing this resolution. There are big concerns here, and the biggest concern we have is to do with the treatment and mistreatment and eventual destruction of what will amount to hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of human embryos. This resolution sparked a lot of conversation at the convention. It ultimately ended up passing by a pretty good majority. But it's the first statement, Dr. Moeller says in his briefing kind of thing, from a Protestant denomination on the moral evil of this IVF technology. And so this conversation will continue among Southern Baptists. Really, Moeller and others and people who voted this resolution through are really trying to say and generate conversation about the fact that as Christians, we believe life exists. You're a unique human being from the time of fertilization until death. And if we truly believe that, and that is our pro-life stance as Christians, as Southern Baptists, we need to raise voice concerns about technologies that would cause a lot of morally evil, produce a lot of human or children at embryonic state of fertilization that are frozen. And we need to consider this not a morally neutral technology, but a push towards a morally evil technology. So go check out Al Moeller's for more on it. I personally abstained from this vote because I hadn't fully found the resolution in the guide, hadn't read up on it. So I didn't vote in favor or against it. I think is a strong thing, and I think it definitely is morally evil. So I probably would have voted for it now based on the research I've done. But this does not rule out the fact this is a difficult conversation for families, for Christian families struggling with infertility. This resolution goes above and beyond to say that we stand behind the value of any child, regardless of how they come into the world, morally evil or not. It's really just saying we have problems with the commercializing, the big business of IVF, and even seeing how it's being used by those of gay, lesbian, transgender. Like, it's become a commercialized moral bullet. It's a huge train that's pushing people, and we want to get out in front of it and say as Christians that we have issues with this technology. So more discussion on that is going to come in the future. Please give me charity in the comments. I'm just trying to put forward what the conversation is about and say my initial reaction feeling is this way. But all of these things need to be considered with grace and love towards people in our congregation, towards people who struggle with these types of issues. So, another issue that came up is the ERLC, or the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. There was a motion from Tom Askell, who's a pastor, also a leader of Founders Ministries, to abolish the ERLC. So I had to dig into this for a little bit. Honestly, the vote to dissolve the ERLC would have needed to pass twice in order for it to actually take effect. I don't know if everyone in the room realized that when he brought up the motion, but both this year and next year it would have had to pass. The vote ultimately failed, but it was not a landslide failure. There were a lot of people with raised ballots for the dissolving of the ERLC, which was really sends a message to the ERLC, which was Pastor Askell's goal with bringing up this motion. So what really brought him to motion the dissolving of this Southern Baptist entity? So the ERLC, for those who don't know, is really the political entity. It's in Nashville near the executive committee that lobbies on behalf of Southern Baptists to present our views to political leaders in the sphere. At least that's the way it's supposed to work. And so Founders Ministry, the ministry associated with Tom Askell, hosted this event at the SBC called "Is the SBC for Sale?" And so I've linked to an article that kind of summarizes Megan Bashan's future book that's coming out on these types of issues. And she gave a full lecture kind of speech on how different think tanks, different funding agencies, liberal things are using the ERLC to use language and share their ideas with Southern Baptists instead of the ERLC taking stuff from us and presenting our views to the political sphere. And so that conversation is going on. It says in this article, the ERLC was created to represent the interests of Southern Baptists to the secular political world. Instead, it is now taking money to represent the interests of the secular political world to Southern Baptists. And so this will continue to be an ongoing conversation. What's being really just talked about here is, who are they serving? We only give them a very small percentage, about 3 million or so of the cooperative program, which is very minuscule when it comes to the political lobbying that's going on in DC and other things to represent us. But they are getting funding from other places, and they are being used by other places to represent views that some, especially in the polarization of the Southern Baptist Convention at this time, with people, different fractions and things showing their heads in different parts. There are people like Askell and others who say the SBC should have more of a voice in the political sphere, more of a cultural warrior stance type of thing. And we would have to fund the ERLC way more, and we definitely don't want them representing secular ideas to us. And so that's the conversation going on. It failed, but it is a message to the ERLC to get its act together, or at least to be a bit more transparent and try to represent us better. And that's what people are raising the conversation about. Next, financial transparency and church planting reports /health from NAM specifically. I don't have tons of details here. I'm just going to have echoes that came as I was at the convention that I wanted to bring up here. So Bart Barber at the 9 Marks at 9 event on the state of the convention talked about, there's been lots of questions on the floor about the financial reporting of different entities and institutions of the SBC, specifically NAM, or the North American Mission Board. And so he was saying at 9 Marks, he said there's a shadow issue behind a lot of those financial questions. He said, I want to address that shadow issue. And he says in the clip, it's that our entity heads are not overpaid. So there's a bunch of people pushing. He says, I think really to get at, are we overpaying people who are leading our entities? And he points to the executive committee in that clip at 9 Marks and says, specifically, the executive committee took almost 2 years to fill a spot of someone to lead the executive committee. And he said, if you are grossly overpaying someone to lead an organization or an entity, you would have no problem filling that position. He says, I can't disclose numbers. Like, people don't, I don't even know personally, just me. I don't know who knows those numbers. But he said they are paid comparative or competitive wages with similar jobs in the secular realm. They are paid well to do their job, but not overpaid or grossly overpaid. And so there's people pushing for that. But I also talked to my lead pastor about this, and he said there's lots of call for NAM, the North American Mission Board, to publish more about church numbers and different things, because Kevin Ezell specifically and some others have changed how NAM funds certain things at the state, local level. And so there's people calling for more transparency in those things. We'll see where those conversations go. But there's been a change up, and I don't even know how many years ago, how much NAM funds. That NAM used to fund associational missionaries. NAM used to fund some different things at the state level that they've pulled back from in order to focus more on Great Commission work, church planting, some of those things. And people want to see what the results are, and they're pushing for more of those kind of reports. Last but not least, on major issues that came up, the Abuse Reform Report came back to us. The Abuse Reform Implementation Task Force, as it's known, came back to the Southern Baptist Convention, to all the messengers, said they have done their work, and they're really relinquishing the rest of the work that needs to be done to the executive committee. They did that also as they were rolling out the Essentials curriculum was launched with their website, digital and printed materials. I have the website you can look at, linked on my blog stuff notes. So check out the blog link in the description, and you can go see this website and the curriculum that they handed out. It's really how to make your church a healthy and safe place. And so this is a really cool ministry tool that they rolled out for us, and it really handed over to the SBC / the executive committee a few of the remaining things, as well as the website and some other ongoing projects, and said, hey, the EC is stronger now with Jeff Org taking over, and they are committed to working through some of the financial and insurance issues. And so we're going to turn over the remaining few little projects to finishing out by the executive committee. And we've done our work to try to do the work that they were formed to do. So great resource for churches there. Moving on to the next section, upcoming convention items for 2025. So these are items beyond what I just mentioned above, because there will be continued conversation on the items and issues I just talked about. Some will go into the background, some will remain in the foreground, some will be coming up next year in Dallas, Texas, where the convention is going to be. So these are issues beyond what I have already discussed. So I just shared one of them, the upcoming SBC locations. So the next Southern Baptist Convention will be June 10th and 11th. In Dallas, Texas in 2025. That'll be followed up by the convention being Orlando, Florida in 26, Salt Lake City, Utah in 27, and then back in Indianapolis, Indiana for 2028. Another issue that was publicized a lot for those listening to Southern Baptist and Baptist channels going into the convention was there was going to be a motion made by certain leaders to add the phrase, the creed, to our Baptist Faith and Message 2000, or our confessional document as a denomination. And so also this motion was, there was another motion made just to add the creed, being the Nicene Creed, and there was another motion made during the convention to add all three historic creeds, Apostles' Creed, the Athanasian Creed, and the Nicene Creed, to the BF&M 2000 as an appendix, I believe. And so both, I think, based on what I heard, were referred to the executive committee to handle at some of their meetings that happen throughout the year. So we'll see what happens with those. It's kind of an interesting thing that 2025, next year, is going to be the 1700th anniversary of the Nicene Creed. And so I think there's a little bit of push for that to happen. But there's also conversation by the Center of Baptist Renewal, as well as some of these leaders, about how Baptists are embracing some, getting to the river, I would say the banks of the river on some of our orthodoxy, specifically regarding the Trinity, who Jesus is, and they're making some of those arguments, and we need to just clearly hem those in and be very clear in our churches by adopting these historic three Christian creeds. If you want some good videos on this topic to dig more into it, Gavin Ortland, Truth Unites, does a really good video that linked in my blog post. And also the Center for Baptist Renewal, so Dr. Malcolm Yarnell as well as Dr. Stephen McKinnon are in this video going line by line through the creed, and you can find some other videos out there talking about this motion. Dr. Matthew Barrett from Midwestern Seminary is also involved in this push, and so we'll see what becomes of this addition potentially to the Baptist Faith and Message 2000, and see where this conversation about adding the creeds or just kind of saying, yes, we believe this, where those conversations go. The last thing is next year in 2025 will be the 100th anniversary of the cooperative program, which is the main funding engine for what we do as Southern Baptist at the national, state, and local level together. So for those who don't know, my church, local autonomous Baptist churches give to the cooperative program, and a section of that giving goes to their local association, and then a section of that giving goes to the state, and then a section of that giving goes to the national convention or the national entity, and then they split that between the national entities. Other ways people give to Southern Baptist causes could be the International Mission, Lottie Moon and Annie Armstrong offerings, one for the National Mission or North American Mission Board, one for the International Mission Board. And there are other certain ways you can give directly to entities as well. But next year we celebrate the 100th anniversary of the cooperative program, so 1925 to 2025. There's a website with more logos and things that you can celebrate. There'll also be a book coming out from B&H Publishing, so A Unity of Purpose, that will come out for the occasion and be released in May of 2025. Probably looks to be kind of a collection of different essays and things for people talking about the goodness of the cooperative program. I personally am very thankful for the cooperative program because it paid a lot of my education at a Southern Baptist seminary. And so as a member of a Southern Baptist church, every single semester, I could put in what church I was attending. I was an active member, and I got a standard deduction off my seminary bill. And I'm very thankful for Southern Baptists who helped pay my way through seminary and allowed me to live here, serve in my local church, do distance learning through Southeastern, and finish a degree at a lower cost because of other Southern Baptists cooperating together and giving. That's what the cooperative program / the IMB stuff, that's what funds our missionaries. If you feel called to be a missionary, there are certain training things that you go through as an IMB missionary preparing for the field. We want to have you to have certain things in place and certain checks and balances. We guard it really carefully who we send based on criteria of who's going to serve, and to make sure that they're equipped and they're ready to go serve with longevity in ministry. But all of the funding is already there. They do not have to raise support once they go through those types of training programs and they're equipped and they're sent on mission. It's really kind of a beautiful thing that Southern Baptists do. And so I'm thankful as a recipient of cooperative program funds from other churches. And I wholeheartedly love the fact that we as Southern Baptists are not a perfect people, but people in general who love Jesus, proclaim the gospel, and are about fulfilling the Great Commission. So, final thoughts. I already just gave a couple of them, but let me go through what I put on my notes for you guys. Southern Baptists are a peculiar people. Our polity and structures and other things. Bart Barber, as the president, who before he handed it off to Clint Presley, who's the newest president of the SBC, said during the SBC this year, one of the best things about Southern Baptists is that anyone can go to the microphone, and one of the worst things about Southern Baptists is that anyone can go to the microphone and be heard about the business that they want to speak about at the national level. So we're a peculiar people. We're not a perfect people. We don't get everything right in the beginning. But Dr. Moeller as well as Dr. Aiken have said it many times before, and I really have seen that over my period of time as a Southern Baptist, really became Baptistic confessionally and part of a Southern Baptist church. I've been Baptistic confessionally all of my life, historically Baptist distinctives, but really became a member of an SBC church around 2014 or so. So you can get more of that by searching on my channel for my theological journey and get more of that. But Dr. Moeller and Aiken have said many times before, Baptists are not people who, he said they're like, I guess the best way to say this is Baptists don't always move in the straightest line from A to B, but we eventually get from A to B. And so we usually end up in the right place and we get there eventually. So the tempo kind of leaving Indianapolis, really, as I was just feeling it out, is that we are a people committed to cooperating together to fulfill the Great Commission. That's why Baptists get together, to see people saved, to see people baptized, to see people sent on mission, and to fulfill the Great Commission and to make Christ known. There are some visual signs of disunity and factions around some different things. There are those who are more conservative, more fundamentalist. There are those who want us to go more of a political direction. There are those who want us to go, you'd have some progressives kind of on the edge and different things. But the centrist, as I've seen them, Baptists, want to cooperate together to fulfill the Great Commission and are not afraid of theological issues. We are not just dealing with practical issues. We are dealing with theological issues, which is really refreshing as a denomination. But you do see some of those tribalisms, some of those factions, some of those things going on in the conversations. And so for right now, the majority believe that trust the mechanism. That was the resounding vote in the failure of the law amendment. Even though it almost passed, it's got 61% plus, needed 66, is that we are okay with the mechanism we have in place for dealing with churches that have women or female pastors. And we will see what the year ahead brings as Southern Baptists. So for now, we go back to our churches. So what happens now? So now we, as pastors, messengers, members of our local churches, we go back to our churches to preach the Bible, to evangelize people, to call out the called to serve in ministry, our young people. We just celebrated the end of camp here at our church, and we had 12 or so students say they felt in some way God was calling them into some type of lifelong ministry. That's what Southern Baptists are about. That's what Baptists are about. That's what gets people excited about cooperating together for the Great Commission, is people serving the Lord on mission, sending missionaries, seeing people meet Jesus, not all of this political garb that comes about it, even though that is part of it as well. And so we go home to call out the call to serve in ministry, both in the church, both in the national level and international. We also go back to steward our resources faithfully as individuals and as churches, and to do the work of ministry. So with that, a little bit longer video. I got 2 more videos coming out reflecting on the SBC 2024. One just kind of highlighting some of the memories and moments I had there, as well as some of the giveaways and things I'm thankful that I got as a part of being at the SBC. And also one deeper dive into women pastors and the law amendment. There's some other things I want to cover there and share with you guys in a longer video. So I'll link those in the description once those videos come out. I would love to know from you guys, what further questions do you have? If you made it to the end of this video, maybe you skipped a whole bunch and went straight to the end. What further questions do you have about Southern Baptist life, about the Southern Baptist Convention as a whole, or other conversations and things that happened at the SBC? So with that, until next time, continue to read, treasure, follow the word. God bless, and I'll see you guys soon.